You want to call your panel? Can you quote all those names, you think?
Well, you keep adding people to the list, so I'll just call, yeah, can the whole of Europe please come out?
Please, Europe,
Everyone?
can you come in? Everyone. Join us on stage. Here we go. I don't even know where we were going to sit. Martin Varsavsky, Michael Jackson. That's the real Michael Jackson. Brent Hoberman, Mike Butcher, JP Rangaswamy from BT, Cyril Zimmermann, Freddy Mini, Lukasz Gadowski. You won't fit in there, so I'm going to sit here. Lukasz, you want to sit with me?
I'm taking the white one, but you can have... You can have the stool. Why don't you take the stool? Yeah, why not?
We have no seat.
Yeah, you can just stand. You'll be fine.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yes, so is anyone else really freaking tired? Am I, yeah, so welcome to the European gang. I have absolutely no idea what that means. People have been asking me all day, what is the European gang? And judging by the fact that Loic has just been adding people to the European gang all day, I think we now have every single European entrepreneur on stage. So
well, the purpose is to have you in minority first.
Sorry?
The idea is to have you as a minority.
I am a minority in this. As a failed European entrepreneur turned Silicon Valley success, like you, I mean.
That starts very well.
So we're gonna have I said I'd be gentle on Loic because he's very tired, but I was lying. So we're gonna have a discussion about what's going on in Europe, and particularly for those of you who weren't here last year, there was a Gilmore gang discussion which descended into a fight. Would that be fair, Loic? An entente not cordial.
I was hoping you wouldn't address that topic.
Well, you brought up my Guardian column, so it's only fair. But basically, there was a discussion about how the Valley versus Europe. So I figured, I figured this was a good way to redress the balance. So I think the best way to start would be for everyone to go around in one line, just introduce themselves, and make sure everyone knows everyone. So should we start? Let's start this side and work along.
Cyril Zimmermann, I'm the founder and CEO of High Media, which is the leading online advertising network in Europe, and a global micropayment solution leading in Europe and present in the US since a year. So basically our bet is to promote the paid content, but also the free content, and to monetize it in two ways, either through micropayments and either through advertisement. Company is public, and we have 500 employees, mainly in Europe, although we have 35 people working for the group in the US, in New York, and in the Valley in San Francisco.
Hi, so I'm Lukasz, based in Berlin, and what I do is like seed investing in companies and also launching a few companies a year. And with that, often showing like to the US guys that they have no clue about how to go international, and we grab all the market share before they even know what's happening to them.
Everyone knows Loic. My name is Mike Butcher, and I'm the editor of TechCrunch Europe, and also an advisor to a new space called Tech Hub in London, which is going to bring all your European startups back to London and get you to mix in a real-world space. So that's Tech Hub, and Mike Butcher from TechCrunch Europe. Thank you. Go.
Hi, I'm JP Rangaswamy, Jobsworth on Twitter. I'm chief scientist at BT, and I'm chairman of a company called Ribbit, which happens to traverse the Atlantic.
If you like the Wi-Fi, you might want to thank JP, because it's mostly because of the team work of British Telecom.
Woo!
And we'll come back to it.
I'm hoping we can fill the whole panel up with just applause and introductions. So I think the 40 minutes is going to fly by for everyone.
Okay, I'm Michael Jackson. I'm a partner at Mangrove Capital. We have the honor to invest in European technology and internet companies.
Well, I guess I already had an introduction, so I wanted you too, by the way.
Anything to announce?
I'm Martin Varsavsky, CEO of Fawn.
Yeah, I've done my thing too earlier before, but I'm Brent Hoberman, co-founder lastminute.com, mydeco.com, and now ProFounders Capital, an early-stage venture capital fund.
And I'm Freddy Mini. I'm the CEO of Netvibes, and I love San Francisco and Paris.
Nice. The whole room now on your side.
Friend with everybody.
Okay, well, I guess I want to start by asking, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to point this to yet, but I'm tempted to go to Loic with this. There seems to be a lot of discussion at the conference about a lot of Europeans saying, oh, isn't Europe great? And, you know, Europe, we're brilliant. We're just as good as America. I've been sort of on the record for saying that that's sometimes bullshit. And you seem to be the poster child for that bullshit, because you run a conference called LeWeb, and you know, which is celebrating Europe. But you were the first to get on a plane, and you're now. I see you in Silicon Valley, and your company is you have American investors. And how do the two fit together? How are you not a hypocrite?
You mean in general?
No, generally, yeah. How do you reconcile those two positions? That's
Loic,
my
maybe a
question.
French problem?
I'm not sure if I got that right. It must be my English.
How do you
It's not
reconcile being a French
it's not your
Silicon
English.
Valley?
It's my question is you're
I'm French. I'm European, and I live in the US. That's what you mean?
Right, exactly. So how do you reconcile the two? Because you are obviously a huge supporter of the European scene, and you say that startups can succeed here, but you don't live here.
I have a team in Europe. And
No, I understand.
Yeah, and Freddy is the same. He's based in the US, but he has a team here. And the way I reconcile it, I think, is not to care too much about it.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I don't think there are that many differences. And the reason why LeWeb is in Paris and staying in Paris is that I think it helps to not tell people to think US. I think that's the wrong question. But more to think global. We have 50 countries in this room. And that's how I feel, I feel I don't care, actually, whether we are in Europe or in the US. So I actually think this entire panel is not relevant, but you really wanted...
the entire panel isn't relevant, is it?
Paul, the thing is not to think in the terms of Frenchmen in the Valley or someone trying to scale a startup in Croatia and then go global. The thing is to think in terms of who's got a big market and how do we take it? There are 4 people in Edinburgh right now doing a startup called HubDub, which aims entirely at the US. And when I rang them up and they said, do you have a UK site? They said, no, it's under international. We're aiming at a big market, the US, and we pretend to be American. All of our so they play the game right. And that doesn't mean to say that you can't do.
So playing the game right is to accept that America is where everything is.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's a big market. If you want to go after another big market, go after China. Do everything in Chinese. It's a market.
Martin.
No, I just have a story to tell. When Phone was the first company outside or in Europe that Google invested in, and the first European company that Sequoia invested in. So when I had the phone idea in Spain and went to Silicon Valley, they loved the idea, share a little Wi-Fi at home, roam the world for free. And then Sergey from Google says to me, but of course, you're going to move here, right? And I said, no, we're not moving to Silicon Valley. And he says, but name one great company, great technology company out of Spain. And I said, Phone.
Sorry.
And I can add on to that, of course, the European Skype story that I was involved with. That's a company that had no US presence whatsoever until eBay bought the company. Millions of users, a lot of satisfied people, and a product that's essentially the same now that millions of people enjoy every day. So you can build out of Europe for sure, without needing any US presence whatsoever.
Yes, I just wanted, because I did exactly the opposite of yes.
I
did the opposite of Loic. I actually was in the Valley in the mid-90s, and I went back to Europe. But I have to say the Valley that I knew in '95 has nothing to compare to what exists today. And I think what's completely changed the way startups can operate here and with the US is the ability of social media and social networks. Today, there's a deep connection between people here in Europe and in the US that didn't have at the time. I mean, in the mid-90s, most of the French entrepreneurs would go there and knew no one. They had to go and grow. Now, I mean, just come to this conference, you keep staying on Twitter, Facebook, and you have the connections all the time. I mean, it keeps going better. I think being in Europe, because of this environment of social networks, make no difference than being in the Valley itself.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter now is kind of like the platform for Europe. When I wake up in the morning, half my feed is Berlin, then it goes to Paris, then it's London, and then it switches to New York. So it's quite a global platform. Twitter is a bloody brilliant platform for checking out entrepreneurs and startups.
You need to stop sleeping, Mike. Then you
yeah,
can
I
just
know.
Brent.
Mike won't let me sleep.
I think the point is, to get the job done. I mean, if the job is done by French people or Romanian...
You have to speak in the mic, Freddy.
The point is, you get the job done. I mean, is the problem because it's done in France or done in Switzerland? I mean, it's the same piece of software, isn't it?
Yeah, don't ask me, but yeah, possibly.
I mean, I think we're all being slightly disingenuous. I think there is a problem, and the examples we state are extremely, extremely rare and much rare. The billion-dollar-plus companies, because we tried to work out, plus European companies, we tried to work out yesterday to get a panel of billion-dollar-plus European companies, and there are a few who weren't there. Betfair will be one, Business Objects another one. So there are a few that we haven't named today, but the issue we have is one of scaling, and it was one we alluded to yesterday. Scaling a company across Europe is harder than scaling it across America. So it was nice to hear the Minister for Internet in France yesterday say that she's addressing that with Spain as part of the presidency of the EU. But let's not say it's no problem, because then the politicians will do nothing about it. And actually, there is a point where politics can act. Don't let's think that anything government do has to always be bad. There are things that they can do to help. And let's not discourage that.
Brent should disclose an interest here, because he is on the board of Last Minute. So the more people who just get on a plane and go to San Francisco...
Sold the company in 2006. All I want them to do is do up their houses on mydeco.com now.
That's
I
true.
want the free commercial. I was trying to get away from the free commercial.
No, use it. But
I prefer to think that we're actually talking about three different things, and while it's enjoyable to polarize the argument, you start with saying, does talent have borders or passports? And the answer is no. Okay? So there isn't a Europe or American issue about talent. As Loic said, there are already 60 countries in this room, and 60 countries are slightly more than either Europe or America contained the last time I counted. Both may wish to be that the number is greater, but the answer is not. So on a talent perspective, there is neither a divide nor a difference to matter.
But talent needs to be nurtured, and you need to...
Then you look at the two other elements, funding. And funding, I would accept that historically, it was a lot easier to raise funds for startups in Silicon Valley than it was in Europe. But over the last 15 years or so, that has changed. There was certainly a case where funding was maturer, better. The entire ecosystem for a startup used to be fantastic in the US, particularly in Silicon Valley. And that made a difference. But that is less so today. But there is a difference. But the third
I'm hearing here
is what Brent was talking about, which is regulation. Right? And in regulation, the fact that you have one united country, even though it's, it has a federal system about it, with one language, right? There is ability to scale up in the US. That's a lot easier. Now, it's going to be interesting when I watch scale happen in India, when you have 12 real large languages, or China, because we're going to learn whole new things about scale. But the scale problem is partly regulation and partly culture and language.
What I was just going to say is what I'm hearing a lot here is why going back to Europe to keep on sort of broadly on topic is a lot about why Europe is either as good as or catching up with America. But so, I would like to hear from somebody why, if you were say you're in Silicon Valley, what would make you think, oh, where would be better for this business to start? I should go to Europe. Europe's great. Why would you want to move the other way? And if because I don't hear in Silicon Valley anyone sitting there talking about how they can compete with Europe.
Food.
The food is better this year.
If I can say something here, it's I mentioned this yesterday. Europe's GDP is 30% larger than America's GDP. There's more money in Europe. There's more people in Europe. It is a little harder to crack because of diversity and because of laws that are really kind of nasty to startups compared to established companies.
Right.
Or there's a lack of distinction between infancy and adult life in the life of companies.
Yep.
But other than that, I lived half of my professional life in the States. I built companies there, and the other half in Europe. And I'm very happy doing this here. One of the advantages of Europe is there is less competition. There are less entrepreneurs.
But why are there less entrepreneurs? Because it's harder to do business here.
But as an entrepreneur, I moved from America to Europe, and I found, especially in Spain, everybody grows up to want to be a civil servant. So as an entrepreneur, you have an opportunity there in a land of people who are not dying to be anyone's boss or not promoting anyone's ideas. Spain is a country about being humble, being modest, being not different than the rest.
Yeah.
And many...
Like France.
Yeah, well...
Very humble and modest.
Yeah, but Martin, if I may, there's something has changed because there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this
Your mic,
room.
Tariq.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think that something changed 4 or 5 years ago. Now it's cool again. I mean, most of the problem when you start is you have people that are extremely highly qualified in terms of technology, and they basically don't know. The value of their work is not well appreciated here in France. I mean, when we started Netvibes or Jolicloud, and Phone, we're doing things that disrupt huge business. And if you're not building nuclear plants or working in oil or large companies, it's true that in Europe, we don't really care. But for the first time, and I think because of the relationship with the US, the Valley, and Europe, now you start to see developers that say, hey, we're in Europe, what we do is cool, we should do better. But then again, we have two problems. The infancy is very hard because you have to be a believer, more believer than in the US. And when you start to get this mid-size, become a billion-dollar company is almost impossible because there's very rare, I don't know, maybe Martin can say how many companies, purely tech, got above $1 billion so far. Yeah. These are the two problems. But if you're in the middle, you can stay in the middle for a while.
So where is the answer to the question of why Europe?
Yeah, but we mentioned the size of the market. Obviously, the US market is larger, but there's also a question of maturity. I mean, the online penetration historically was first in the US before it came to Europe. So that's also why people wanted to launch project in the US before launching it in Europe. Yeah. It may be different in the mobile world. Apple, the iPhone is something different, which is US originated, but everything which is beyond Apple and iPhone and mobile world is mainly European or from Asia. So in the mobile world, I think there's going to be plenty of projects coming from Europe that maybe is going to take some leads over the US or inspire some US entrepreneurs. And whether they are US, European, we don't care.
Right, well, sorry, go on. I was just saying, on the two questions here, there's a question of, do you trade with Europe? Or, you know, if Europe is a bigger market, that's great. But why don't you do the reverse of the business Mike mentioned, where that's fine, be based in the US and then make sure you have a very prominent various European sites. I'm saying about basing your business in Europe, and it seems I'm hearing 90% problems to maybe 10% better, and I'm still urging someone to tell, apart from...
Well, I tell you two things that suck in America. Legal costs and healthcare costs. Like in Spain, we don't pay medical costs because the state offers a great medical care. When I have employees in America, I'm down $1,000 on every employee because if we don't provide healthcare, nobody else does. So I think that healthcare is terrible in America. Legal costs are crazy, but not just legal costs are crazy in America. Uncertainty, like legal uncertainty. When I do business in America, I'm always non-disclosure this and lawyer for that. And a child visits your home and maybe they sue you because the child falls. And there are really nasty things about doing this business in America, but especially
invite children
health
into your
and
office.
legal.
That's my tip. Keep children well away.
But I think that there's maybe a problem with the whole argument here, because I think the war that there's not really a war between entrepreneurs in Europe versus entrepreneurs in America. There's kind of a war really between entrepreneurs in Europe against their own governments, because they're not creating a regulatory environment or a policy environment to encourage entrepreneurs in. Despite the fact that Sweden seems to spit out a lot of startups, like the kinds of things that came out of Estonia and Sweden and Scandinavia, like Skype and now recently Spotify, they based their company for tax reasons in Luxembourg, and their headquarters are in London, because London's still pretty much, even if you ask anybody, is still the place to do a music startup. So the music scene is definitely in Europe, so that's a good place to do a startup. But the regulatory aspect, like, you know, trying to hire and fire people, trying to incentivize people with bonuses, trying to get seed capital. I mean, very interestingly, in France recently, they've actually, the government here has been actually incredibly good, because I travel around Europe a lot talking to startups, and they've started to go, now, what happens if we give wealthy people an incentive to invest in new startups? That's a good thing. They get a tax break for that. And that's the kind of thing that European governments need to do. That's the war that we want to have with our governments, not with American entrepreneurs.
Don't you think that the companies start where the founders are? I mean, simply said. I mean, to the example of Telsa. I mean, Telsa is a car company.
Speak into the mic, Freddy.
Oh, yeah, Telsa is a car company.
You have to basically swallow it.
Swallow it, please.
Yeah, Telsa is a car company. And the car company is born in Palo Alto, and they should have been born in Detroit, right?
Well, maybe at a time, but maybe... No, I would argue if you're doing at such a high-tech car company, probably Palo Alto is the place to do it. But you're talking within the US. Why wasn't it made in Europe?
Well,
I mean, apart from
my point is, you know, the guy from Telsa were probably, you know, from
Steal
Palo Alto, and probably from Palo Alto, and that's the reason why they built a company where they were.
I don't think so, yeah. I think it's from South Africa.
He's a Jewish South African like me.
Yeah, who moved to, which kind of backs up the point. He wasn't born there, he moved there. Loic, who has his startup in San Francisco, wasn't born there, he moved there. There is no doubt that Europe is capable of giving birth to people. I mean, I've seen it happen. We had a whole thing at school about it. It was quite gross at that age. But the point is, once they've been given birth and grown up and they've started companies, because we're really good at ideas too, but then I'm still looking for that reason not to just get on a fucking plane. And everyone's telling me, oh no, Europe will be doing well, you know, and we need to fight about regulation and everything else. We could do that, or we could get on a fucking plane.
It's a matter of perception and self-marketing. If you take an American entrepreneur and a French or a Spaniard and a German entrepreneur, they have the same idea, they have the same product. 90% of the time, whether European or American, you buy the US one because the self-marketing and the way to sell it is better. Mm-hmm. And in the end, the idea, the project, the funding, the technology may be the same, but we must just recognize that how long as it regards the way to sell the project, present it and market it, US do it better. Mm.
Yeah, there's a broader issue here, which is about platforms. And just that today what we see is these platforms are so much more important than they've ever been. Twitter, Facebook, Google, whatever, they're platform businesses. They are winner-take-all businesses. And so that's something that matters. And the second point that was raised yesterday was about the cloud. And do we care? It was from the Dassel guys. Do we think there should be a European cloud project? And is that something we care about? Right? Those were some interesting.
But also, you're assuming that what you're saying is true, but it's not always true. There's there's a lot of Americans who move to Europe to start businesses, and there's people. I used to be a U.S. citizen, and I gave up I was forced to choose. Do you want to be Spanish or U.S.? Mm-hmm. And I was sad, but I went back and I gave back my U.S. citizenship, and I became a Spanish citizen. And the people at the American Embassy couldn't believe it, but there are people who actually go the other way, and I'm one of them.
I'm just trying to find out still why. What is the benefit? And
well, I think that the point is where you're born, and also as soon as possible where you can grow, and as soon as possible where you can expand to be the citizen of the world. Because otherwise you can start in the U.S. and you will stay in the U.S. for a while, and be a great American company and be very profitable. But you will be a great American company, not global. Mm-hmm. So my point is, you start where you feel comfortable, having your roots, and immediately or very soon. You find, with a place where you need to, grow internationally.
So the benefit, where's the benefit? The benefit is just talent, just the people that are here. And this is the scarce resource in the long run. So right now, the US might have an advantage because if they have a much more developed financial system. I mean, they even can buy like Bebo for a few $100 million. But in the long run, the scarce resource will be talent. And we are here, and that's why Europe matters. That's it.
I want to go back to Brent's point a bit, right? As BT, when we went and bought Ribbit, right, we would have bought Ribbit whichever country it was in. We'd have paid the $100 million for it because we liked what the people they represented. The people were already multinational. It so happened that the environment conditions were right, and the company was founded in Mountain View. Now, I haven't moved the company, but I haven't necessarily said I'm moving the rest of us to Mountain View either. Right? We will get our resources from India or China as we need. We will have customers all over the world. And when you go back to the fact that we are now in platform businesses that are cloud-based, the issues are no longer about the physical location of a segment of the population. It's like asking a year ago, if Skype had teams in Estonia, people lived in London, and the ownership used to be in the US. What would you have called that company? And it's easy to say it's European. Actually, it's not. It's global. Okay? But global gets screwed up because we could have things like data protection regulation breaking the cloud up into 3 or 4 pieces. I know as many companies who tell me, I want all my data in the US, as who tell me, I want none of my data in the US. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, that is the kind of fragmentation that happens when regulation, inappropriately handled, deals with stuff like data protection. Okay? Those issues are why I may elect to have certain businesses run in Europe, because you're almost on regulatory arbitrage to say, what are the things that is easier for me to do in Europe? And there are some. What are the things that is easier for me to do in the US? And there are some. Yep. So you're then dealing with just comparative advantage issues rather than a polarized, I'm going to choose which side of the Atlantic I live in. So I live 3/4 of my life this side, and a quarter of my life that side, and I'm pretty happy.
Mike?
Well, I was just going to say that I think we should hear from Lukasz what's going on in Berlin right now, because Nokia is moving a lot of its development and
Doppler have just...
Sorry?
Doppler have just moved there,
Doppler
right?
has just moved to Berlin, so I think that Berlin is a really interesting crucible right now.
Sell Berlin to us, quick.
Yeah, but not only Berlin. So Berlin is just about to start, but we had also like, be it Paris, be it Madrid, Barcelona, whatever. So I think like again, the same point that you just made, the reason for being here is just the talent, the people here, that we are here. And that we're like 2 hours by plane away and we like it here, it's cool, and there's, I mean, so.
I think there is one thing that, if I may say so, because this is what you say always, Lukasz, maybe you can answer, but copying is a problem in Europe, that entrepreneurs try to copy, and we heard it actually, American successes.
Yeah.
That kills European innovation.
Yep.
Because you cannot wake up here, anywhere in Europe, by having, I believe, you cannot wake up by saying, hey, I'm going to copy something cool in the US. And Lukasz, you're one of the guys saying the opposite, right?
Yeah, I mean, we need to copy. On the one hand, like copy, on the one hand, copy kills innovation, yes.
You're killing Europe, I mean.
No. On the one hand, in the short term, copying kills innovation, yes, but in the long term, it builds the ecosystem. You need it. I mean, like a typical seed round, capital. A typical capital seed round in Europe is 500K, and in the US it's 2 million. Yeah, a typical Series A here is 1.5 to 2 million. In the US it's 5 million. And then build something like with the financial ecosystem that we have here, build something like, let's say, a Twitter, okay? Where like revenues are very far away.
But
and
you
it's
go
very visionary.
nowhere.
Nobody finances
the
it
vision. If the vision is let's copy Twitter in Germany, I'm sorry, but that's very sad.
Yeah, then you don't do it. Because if I wouldn't copy a Twitter in Germany, I copy only transaction-based models that are very close to the financial streams. So
well, that's a good.
And we built the ecosystem with that, yeah. And out of that, like talent, learning, the financial system gets strengthened. This is important groundwork that we're doing. Yeah. So,
Loic,
I'm just trying to get some animation.
But let me pick up your point. I mean, I've actually often argued against copying, I'm afraid, because it just sort of feels much less exciting as an entrepreneur. And so I've always tried to, but I do think there's a problem in that it's a lot, the risk of a copycat is so much lower, and the risk of doing businesses in Europe, because we're too early here, whereas you'd be, in the US you wouldn't be too early because you've got the scale already and they're ready for it. So that's the sort of problem with us saying, let's innovate. It's all very well to me to say that because I managed to raise 125 million pounds, so it was easy to keep the innovation going. But if you weren't so lucky, that innovation may have been a lot smaller. So that's the challenge.
There's another thing in the sense that I'm not really in favour of clones, and I've argued against them. But I am in favour of maybe smaller wins. Instead of just trying to hit the ball out of the park all the time, as they do in the States, we should just maybe get some smaller wins or medium-sized wins to create those entrepreneurs who then can do seed stage funding, who then can reach down and mentor. And that's another thing I want to say. I mean, I was talking to Dave McClure the other day, and we were saying one of the things in Europe is I really want to see more openness and more sharing of information from entrepreneurs who've made it, and then can feed that information and that experience back down the food chain to entrepreneurs coming up. If you're in Europe and you're doing a startup, and you're an experienced guy or a girl doing a startup, and you're not mentoring another startup, then what are you doing? You know, you need to get this information out there.
Yes.
But I'd like to say...
Michael first, and then Michael.
Yeah, I mean, what I look at in Europe is the opportunities that exist. There's 26 different countries within the European Union alone. Most of those countries speak different languages. Most of them are different cultures. And with every one of those countries, there are different business possibilities. And every one in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Spain, wherever, you can build a very successful business that simply addresses that population all on its own. And because that's grown up and been released recently in the last 5 or 10 years, trade-wise, there are an awful lot of opportunities within the cross-border side of things with people who haven't been able to access product or services because of these national boundaries that the internet breaks down and allows people to address. I think there's great opportunity within there, just within Europe, for consumers who've been deprived, if you like, over the years.
But in the defense of Europe, again, we lead the world in certain sectors. For example, out of my office came Eolia Renovables. It's the 4th company that I'm involved with or built or found that gets to be worth over $1 billion. And it's an alternative energy company. And we have been visited at Eolia Renovables time and again by American companies who want to imitate what we do with wind farms and solar farms and the alternative energy policies of Europe. And there's a lot of things in which we lead. We shouldn't bash ourselves like as if we're not doing things right.
That's actually
just to come back to the copy thing, I don't get it. Like, I mean, what's the problem with copying? I mean, if a company copies an idea which is coming from the US or everywhere else, in the end, the company will never be exactly a clone. Copying is not making a clone, that's different. Even in art, I mean, you start being an artist by copying other artists, and that's the way you learn. And in the end, you do something different. Because basically, you do it with different people, and you do it on a different market, and the product in the end is different.
So the problem is, you can't then get global scale normally because you're copying the American guy, and you'll just get acquired by him if you're lucky.
You can be specific to a specific market.
It's better than doing nothing. It's better than doing nothing. We all agree it's creating value, definitely, but it's not creating global winners, which is what is more exciting.
I mean, you are on an ego trip. You want to have your specific ID to be the genius that has an original ID. Nobody cares. Stop being egotic. I mean, even if you copy something that's successful, that's fair enough.
But Cyril, that's fine. But Jack Dorsey has not copied anything when he got the idea of Twitter.
Good for him.
No, but if you look, I mean, that's what's very sad is that no global leader on the internet almost is European. I mean, look, face it, right? Yes, you have Lukasz Gadowski making money. Yes, copying.
It's pretty too early. It's pretty too early to have this kind of
which is a regulatory arbitrage. Betfair is a global leader in gambling exchange, but it's a regulatory arbitrage. It existed because of it couldn't be done in the States.
It's pretty early to make conclusions, guys. I mean, that's 15 years that the market exists.
In the US, you got, one man, let's face it, there is a little bit of a bullshit about this clone thing in Europe, right? When in the Valley, somebody did Twitter, and then shortly after, Kevin Rose from Dig launched another micro-messaging, micro-blogging startup, the name of which I forget because it lasted about 6 months. And everyone went, nobody said that was a clone. They said it was an iteration. Now, that was an iteration. I'm not defending clones. I'm in favor of innovation. Absolutely. All the way, go for it. Go for the big play. But the thing is that I don't like it when Americans say, oh, that's a clone. Well, what the hell is, the 5 copies of, eBay or whatever operating in America or whatever?
But none of them are market leaders. You made the kind of point, which is when you copy, it doesn't work. Or it certainly doesn't become the best of breed. No, there are very, very few cases where somebody's copied a good idea and overtaken it. I mean, there are a couple, but that tends to be because the other person dramatically fucked up.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring the issue of Israel. Israel is not part of Europe, technically, the European Union, but
they're in the Eurovision Song Contest.
They're in Eurovision, and we can vote for them. I think Israel is a very interesting example in Europe because they have more VC money than France, for example, goes to Israel, a country of very, very few million people, probably less than the city of Paris. So innovation clusters happen when there's a culture of innovation. They don't just happen in Silicon Valley.
So some is also about working with bigger sectors, like the defense sector, for example. Could we do more in Europe to spin more startups from the defense sector? And how big companies work with small companies and universities?
We've only got a few minutes to go. I just want to finish on a sort of positive note, which is that we should all accept that there are certain things that Europe does well. And I was hoping I might hear more of it from people who are still living here. But we do, somebody mentioned music. I mean, Mike mentioned music startups earlier. And we being European, and London specifically, do really well when it comes to music. Last.fm were acquired by CBS, but they're still based there. We've produced Songkick, we produce countless music startups. Also, gaming we seem to be doing quite well. So, I mean, we had Rockstar, but there's in the social gaming space, Playfish, exactly. There are certain things, and it does seem to me to be creative things that we do very well. But then, like the film industry, we're really good at producing actors and scripts. And then we go to America and they fund them, but it's still a European and British film industry is celebrated. So I wonder if anyone has any other examples of things I've missed, areas where Europe really, when it comes to talent, excels.
I think this must have been a cultural reason to do with the propensity for travel that wasn't car-based for things like the GSM standard, before that the Prestel and Teletext, the entire concept of how the mobile phone industry, not at the Joel sort of angle or the Marty Cooper type level, but where, how and where someone like Nokia took off. And a number of mobile companies have come from Europe because the culture and habits here are different in terms of even the percentage of people who actually have a passport, who tend to move cross-border naturally, and who have an appreciation of the linguistic challenges or the cultural standards that it would represent. So I'm actually very, very happy if people in America believe that post, the next generation of telecommunications invention and innovation is all going to come from America, because I can sit back over here quietly and smile and collect the money.
Yes. And I just quickly, online education, we could be global leaders, particularly from the UK. Online health, still no global winners, still some big opportunities there. Online games, again, we've mentioned some, but the UK has a very vibrant gaming industry. Let's see if it can migrate it online. There's lots of sectors and lots of national champions. I think we can be positive because there are lots of people who are doing very well. So many companies today who are doing 30, 40 million in revenues. It's fantastic. So it is great. Lots of winners around. It's just the billion-dollar company. The issue isn't the $100 million. Lots of people are going to make a lot of money in this room. It's the billion-dollar company.
Forget about
just $1 billion.
No, what I wanted to say is that, that this week we had President Obama here on a major global conference on climate change. And there's no doubt that Europe is a leader not only in the concept and technologies, but in everything related to clean tech. And there is a huge connection between clean technologies and the internet. There are fascinating websites now, Google mashups, that show you the roof of your house and the amount of solar power that you can get. And we are way ahead in Europe in everything that is related to alternative energy, clean energy, solar power, wind power.
Tariq, you.
Yes, I don't think we could just reduce that to sectors, or I think the world is changing. The world we know is just exploding. It's going to be a different world. You talk about climate change. In the next 25 years, we're going to have to be very, very creative. So I think I have no doubt in Europe we have great people that will come up. I think that what happened with the social change, the social networks, the environment is different. I think being an entrepreneur for myself is about passion. It's about defending ideas that I believe are right. It's about trying to find the best people to do it. And you can do that anywhere in the world. I think we haven't break out some codes, but at some point, because of the internet and the availability of capital, the fact that Chinese can found European companies who distribute in the US or going to distribute, think about companies like Spotify or even Phone, there's going to be a massive change. So the entrepreneurs are in Europe. And I don't believe that the barriers to entry are a reason why we shouldn't be good. It's going to happen.
Okay. Well, I think we're out of time, so I just want to thank everyone, the whole of Europe, for showing up.
Lukasz, I was obviously joking.
So hopefully we've all learned a little bit more about how we can champion Europe and work with Silicon Valley, and we can all be friends. So,
how's the Coke Zero thing going? By the way,
the not drinking is doing just fine. I'm going to die shortly. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.